Gradualism is a moral framework. Let's start with the typical question from the pro-life community. Is the posited moral consideration condition necessary or sufficient? One is often best served with the following response. That's a false dichotomy, it is gradual. You agree with this? Let me explain why. A gradualist view begins with a simple observation: morally relevant capacities, sentience, consciousness, memory, agency, social bonds, vulnerability, do not appear all at once. They emerge slowly, layer by layer, across development. If the morally relevant features of a being come in degrees, then the moral weight we assign to that being also comes in degrees. This does not mean early forms of life have no value. It means their value is not yet comparable to the value of a developed child or adult. Gradualism therefore treats moral consideration as continuous, not binary. Everything gets some consideration, but not everything gets the same consideration. This structure fits the way people actually make moral judgments. When forced to choose between saving a 2-year-old child or a frozen embryo, almost everyone, including those who identify as pro-life, chooses the child. They do so without hesitation, and without believing they've committed a moral atrocity. That intuitive response reveals something important. People already treat moral value as graded, even if they verbally endorse an absolutist doctrine of equal human worth. The lived moral intuition is gradualist, even when the stated ideology is not. How gradualism supports the pro-choice framework. Within a pro-choice framework, gradualism provides a principled explanation for why early abortion is morally permissible, while late abortion requires stronger justification. If moral status increases with the development of consciousness, memory, and the capacity for suffering, then the moral stakes of ending a pregnancy are lower early on and rise over time. This maps directly onto the structure of most pro-choice positions. Early abortion is primarily a matter of bodily autonomy, while later abortion involves balancing autonomy against a developing moral claim. Gradualism also fits the pro-choice emphasis on agency. The pregnant person is a fully developed moral agent with interests, plans, relationships, and responsibilities. Their moral status is not in question. A zygote or early embryo, by contrast, lacks the capacities that ground agency or experience. Gradualism therefore explains why the pregnant person's claims can outweigh the embryo's claims early in pregnancy without implying that the embryo is worthless. It is not worthless, it is simply not yet comparable. How gradualism challenges the pro-life framework. Pro-life frameworks often rely on a necessary and sufficient condition model. If something is biologically human and alive, then it has full moral status. This creates a clean, bright line conception that avoids arbitrariness. But it also creates a tension. If all human life is equal from conception onward, then a 2-year-old and a 2-day-old embryo must have the same moral worth. Yet almost no one acts as though this is true. People do not mourn miscarriages the way they mourn the death of a child. They do not risk their lives to save embryos in burning IVF clinics. They do not treat the destruction of embryos as equivalent to homicide. This is not hypocrisy. It is evidence that the absolutist claim does not match human moral psychology. The pro-life framework demands equality of value across all stages of development, but human intuition assigns value gradually, tracking the emergence of the very capacities that make a life rich, vulnerable, and meaningful. Gradualism exposes this tension. If all human life is equal, then our ordinary moral judgments are indefensible. If our ordinary moral judgments are defensible, then not all human life is equal. The core point of contention, the consequence you highlighted, is unavoidable. A gradualist view implies that human lives are not equal in moral weight across all stages of development. But this implication is not a bug. It is a reflection of how people already behave. We prioritize the child over the embryo because the child has a mind, a history, relationships, fears, joys, and a future that is already unfolding. The embryo has none of these yet. To treat them as equal would require ignoring the very features that make human life morally significant in the first place. This is why gradualism is both powerful and controversial. It aligns with intuitive moral judgments, supports the pro-choice emphasis on autonomy and development, and challenges the pro-life insistence on absolute equality. It forces us to confront the fact that valuing life equally in the abstract often contradicts the way we value life in practice. And it reveals that the moral landscape is not divided into two categories, person and non-person, but is instead a continuum where moral consideration grows as the capacities that make life meaningful emerge. Gradualism with equal base value. How it works. A gradualist view does not require denying that all human life has a kind of equal intrinsic value. What it denies is that this equal intrinsic value is the only morally relevant consideration, or that it is always the weightiest consideration. On this model, every human organism, embryo, fetus, infant, adult, shares a baseline moral worth grounded in its human dignity, symbolic significance, and place within the human narrative. This baseline worth is equal across all humans in the sense that no human life is morally worthless, disposable, or beneath consideration. But this equal baseline is only one layer of moral value. It is not the whole story. Over time, additional morally relevant features emerge: sentience, consciousness, memory, agency, relationships, vulnerability, and the capacity for flourishing. These features do not replace the baseline value. They add to it. They generate further moral claims, stronger interests, and heavier moral stakes. Thus, while all human life begins with equal intrinsic value, the total moral weight of a being increases as these capacities develop. The embryo and the adult share the same foundational dignity, but the adult possesses layers of moral significance that the embryo does not yet have. This is not inequality of worth, it is inequality of morally relevant features. Why equal base value does not override all other reasons. The key insight is that equal intrinsic value does not entail equal moral priority. Many moral domains already operate on this principle. In organ transplantation, for example, All human lives are valued equally in the sense that no one is deemed less human or less worthy of moral concern. Yet not all patients are placed equally on the transplant list. Medical urgency, likelihood of survival, age, comorbidities, and quality of life considerations all legitimately affect priority. The equal value of human life is real, but it is not the decisive factor in every context. Other morally relevant considerations can outweigh it without denying it. Gradualism applies the same structure to moral status across development. The embryo's equal baseline value is acknowledged, but it does not outweigh the pregnant person's agency, bodily autonomy, psychological interests, or the richer set of capacities possessed by later developmental stages. As the fetus develops, its morally relevant capacities increase, and so does its moral weight. But the equal baseline value never disappears, it simply does not dominate the moral calculus. Why this strengthens rather than weakens gradualism? This move actually strengthens gradualism against the pro-life critique. Pro-life theorists often argue that gradualism implies that some humans are worth less than others, but the equal base value model shows that this is a misunderstanding. Gradualism does not say that early humans have less intrinsic worth, it says they have fewer morally relevant capacities, and therefore the moral stakes involved in harming them are lower. This is no different from saying that triage, organ allocation, or rescue prioritization can treat cases differently without implying that some humans are metaphysically inferior. The gradualist can therefore affirm, all human life has equal intrinsic dignity. Not all human life has equal moral weight in every decision. Additional capacities generate additional moral claims. These claims accumulate over time, producing a gradual increase in moral stakes. This preserves the moral intuition that human life is special and symbolically significant, while still explaining why a 2-year-old is saved over an embryo, why early abortion is morally lighter than late abortion, and why moral obligations scale with development. What grounds the gradualist principle? Gradualism is grounded in 4 independent foundations that converge on the same conclusion. Moral status tracks the development of morally relevant capacities, and those capacities come in degrees. These foundations are 1. The metaphysics of capacities. 2. The normative relevance of harm. 3. The structure of moral psychology and intuition. 4. The principle of proportional moral weight. Each one is strong on its own. Together they make gradualism look almost inevitable. 1. The metaphysics of capacities, the ontological ground. The first grounding claim is metaphysical. The properties that make a being morally considerable, sentience, consciousness, agency, memory, interests, are not binary. They emerge gradually. This is not a moral claim. It's a descriptive one. Neuroscience, developmental psychology, and biology all show. There is no moment where consciousness suddenly appears. There is no moment where interests suddenly appear. There is no moment where pain perception suddenly appears. There is no moment where agency suddenly appears. These capacities develop continuously, not discretely. If moral status is grounded in these capacities, and these capacities come in degrees, then moral status must also come in degrees. This is the metaphysical backbone of gradualism. 2. The normative relevance of harm, the moral ground. The second grounding claim is normative. The moral weight of harming a being depends on the kind of harm it can suffer. This is a principle widely accepted across moral theories. Utilitarians, harm depends on the intensity and richness of experience. Kantians, harm depends on the degree of agency and autonomy. Virtue ethicists, harm depends on the flourishing the being is capable of. Rights theorists, rights track interests, and interests track capacities. A being with no consciousness, no pain perception, no desires, no narrative identity, no agency, cannot be harmed in the same way, or to the same degree, as a being who has all of these. Thus, the moral significance of harming increases as the being's capacities increase. This grounds gradualism in the structure of harm itself. 3. The structure of moral psychology, the intuitive ground. The third grounding claim is psychological. Human moral judgment already operates gradually, not categorically. This is not a justification by popularity. It's a justification by reflective equilibrium. People consistently judge. Killing a dog is worse than killing a mosquito. Killing a chimpanzee is worse than killing a fish. Killing a newborn is worse than killing a fetus. Killing a 2-year-old is worse than killing a newborn. Killing an adult is worse than killing a 2-year-old. These judgments are not random. They track cognitive sophistication, emotional depth, social embeddedness, vulnerability, agency, future-directed interests. Our intuitions already treat moral status as graded. Gradualism is the theory that best explains this pattern. 4. The principle of proportional moral weight, the structural ground. The fourth grounding claim is structural. Moral obligations scale with the moral stakes. This is a principle used everywhere in ethics. We prioritize saving 5 people over 1. We prioritize saving a conscious being over a non-conscious one. We prioritize preventing severe suffering over mild discomfort. We prioritize beings with richer lives over beings with minimal lives. This principle is not controversial, it's foundational. Gradualism simply applies it to development. Early embryo minimal stakes, late fetus moderate stakes, infant high stakes, child adult maximal stakes. The moral weight increases proportionally with the morally relevant features. The core grounding claim, putting all 4 foundations together. Gradualism is grounded in the fact that morally relevant capacities develop continuously, that harm scales with those capacities, that human moral psychology already tracks this structure, and that moral obligations must be proportional to moral stakes. This is not arbitrary. It is not based on intuition alone. It is not based on sentiment. It is not based on ideology. It is grounded in the metaphysics of development, the normativity of harm, the structure of moral reasoning, and the principle of proportionality. Why this matters for the abortion debate. This grounding explains why gradualism fits the pro-choice framework so naturally. Early abortion involves minimal moral stakes. Later abortion involves increasing moral stakes. The pregnant person's agency always has full moral weight. The embryo's fetus's moral weight grows over time. Moral obligations shift as the stakes shift, and it explains the tension for pro-life absolutism. If all human life is equal, then a 2-year-old and an embryo must be equal. But our moral judgments, behaviors, and practices contradict this. The only way to preserve equal worth is to deny the moral relevance of capacities. But denying the moral relevance of capacities undermines how we treat animals, infants, the disabled, and the dying. Gradualism is grounded because it fits the structure of reality and the structure of moral reasoning.